So, Netflix, Borgen, Greenland. It was almost irresistible not to bring it on the stage. And when I met Svend in Greenland and we sat down and talked, we realized that the making of this series of Borgen, focusing on Greenland and the geopolitical power play with the United States and China and Russia and, of course, the Kingdom of Denmark. It was also a novel way of looking at what we have been talking at the Arctic Circle Assembly, not only yesterday, but also in previous years. And then he told me about the process of how this came about, how those who were responsible for the manuscript and for making this series and bringing Greenland into the previous series of Borgen faced an educational challenge to learn about Greenland in a new way. So, Svend, why don't you come here and join me on the stage? I think I can say truly sit here in the middle.
Thank you.
When I first met him, if anybody had told me he would become a mega TV star, well, sure, he had the look, but the potential coming from Greenland as a member of the rising village, if I may say so, in Nuuk, of influencing the future of Greenland, it was a stretch, but it has happened. And so we will have a dialogue here with you and with the director who will be here on the screen. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Right. And if I may, and then we will have a surprise guest. That's why there is an empty chair. It will be filled before we are finished, but it will in the beginning be an empty chair. So let me start with this question, Svend. You told me that you had to educate Pierre and others. What was the reality of Greenland? So it didn't look like fake, it was real. Give us a sense of that process, and then I will ask Pierre to respond to that.
Well, we were hired to introduce the team behind Borgen, the writer, Adam Prise, and Pierre Fly, the director, and some of the producers to the real issues between Greenland and Denmark, because they also realized that you can only research up to a certain point when you're sitting afar and not taking part of society as such. So my wife and I were hired in to do the introduction to them. So we curated a 2 weeks program for them with focus groups and with various sectors within youth, culture, politics, but also business. And we had very fruitful discussions with them. And probably, as Pierre can say later, is they learned so much that they actually knew so little.
And what happened? They rewrote the script, or?
There were certain elements in the script I was told were rewritten, and certainly also my part that I was offered afterwards. So.
Okay, you are being far too diplomatic in your description of this process, because when we were sharing this dinner table on the restaurant in Nuuk, you were much more open and frank in this discussion. So let me ask you, Pierre, what was this learning process? What had you got right and what had you got wrong in the beginning of the process, looking at how the end product then looked like?
When I got this job, I was asked to do this job. I made one thing clear for the producers, and that was that I want to paint a picture of Greenland that the Greenlandic people could recognize. So that was very important for me to do that. So Svend is perfectly right. When I arrived in Greenland, and met Svend and his wife, I found out that the little I knew about Greenland, I knew nothing about Greenland. And that was very important. I've never been there before. We started working on it. So I spent a lot of time with Svend, and also later on in the process, I spent a lot of time talking to the Greenlandic people. I spent a lot of time finding out how does this look here in Greenland. You know, I've been doing this on the film, many films I made. Right now, I have just made a film in South Africa. It takes so much time to find out how it is to really live in the country of our people in the TV series. So we got a crash course in Greenlandic modern days from Svend, and we worked upon that, and also we improvised a lot with Svend because Svend is not an actor. So there was a lot of things that I didn't know, but I feel I was in the position that I knew I didn't know them. So we needed help and guidance, and we got that.
In the series, I think many in the international audience will be surprised about the kind of self-confidence of the character you play, and how, to some extent, this minister in the government of Greenland feels that he can be a match for the Danish leadership somehow. And to some extent, some of the part of the series seems to be playing like a cat with a mouse with the ministers in Copenhagen. Is this a true reflection of what really happens in Greenland politics?
I would say it depends on the actual minister in question. So at least what I was tasked with was to set up a fictional character that would be a match, because else it wouldn't balance out in the series. And you had to have like a very charismatic and forceful person to do that. Also because there are real issues in the series between the two countries.
Absolutely.
As in reality, right?
Yeah.
So it was adamant for me to portray that person that could balance the issues out in that regard and really put the pressure on the Danes in this story, right? So.
And how did you execute that in the direction of the series? This dilemma, this tension, this potential conflict.
For example, Svend's character in the series was different than the first character we thought of doing that. He was a much more confused character, and when I met Svend, the benefit of having Svend is that he knows everything about the politics. He's been working in there. So I met a modern politician, Greenland man, and I wanted to get that kind of force into my TV show, so it would be authentic. So it was a little more romantic, the character before Svend. But what I didn't know if Svend could do. What I didn't know if Svend could do was the acting. I knew he could do the politics, he could hold the speeches, but could he also cry and had feelings and stuff like that? That was just as important for the role too, and we worked a lot with that, with improvisations, and he could.
Okay, before I bring the surprise guest on the stage, let me open this up to questions from the audience. Okay, yes. We have a question here in the middle. Where are the microphones? Yeah. No. We need the microphone. Come on.
It's just here.
We need more people with microphones. I think my staff here assumed everybody would be starstruck seeing you, wouldn't want to ask questions. Okay.
I'm not going to speak to being starstruck, totally Star Trek. But I wonder, since you were a politician, a public servant, was it difficult to sort of act in that position when you had had some of that experience? Was there tension?
Well, no, it wasn't difficult because it actually made it easier in the sense that I understood the environment, that this drama has its function. But what I learned from Pierre was to build up the character, the fictional character, with elements that made it true to me. And that was a long process. He set me to it right away, started to push me in regards to how to build it up, and I needed to make a credible storyline, a history about the character. I even needed to have one big secret with the character that nobody else knew, and all these kind of things that helped me actually play the character much more real in that sense. So, but I completely understood the environment, and even some of my grandfather is a former politician. We have had a lot of politicians in our home, so I knew them, I know them, right? So but I had to play a more forceful character, and it's also drama, right? So I needed to show more feelings in it. So.
Can I ask you, Per, about the reaction in Denmark? Because I think for most of us who watched the series, we were so fascinated by Greenland being portrayed in this way and presented in this way. And of course, those of us who watched previous parts of the series, we knew the Danish political scene that the Borgen had previously drawn up. But what was the reaction on the process among both the Danish staff of the series, but also the Danish political community to this part of the Borgen series?
I think there were people were very fond of the series and very respectful of the way we portrayed it, the Greenland's people and place. So I think that it's been very well received also among my friends who knows just as little about Greenland as I did before I went into this. They feel it's kind of a new Greenland they've seen because what we have seen to be a little rough was the Queen's visits and the Christmas calendar. That was our picture. That's more or less our picture. If we don't study anything, picture of Greenland. And I think that the series, because of the Greenlandic actors and because of we did so much work to make it look like a modern, contemporary Greenland, I think that there's a lot of respect around that. And I'm so glad for that, because that was goal number one in this.
Great. So, as all of you know who have watched the series, the Danish Arctic ambassador in the series, this young man, is perhaps the element also that creates dramatic dimension and so on in the series. And it's an interesting portrayal of a young Danish official in the foreign ministry. We tried to get him to come here, but he is filming another series or movie. So in his place, we are honored to have the real Danish ambassador, the Arctic ambassador, Thomas. Great. Well, thank you, Thomas, for doing this. Yes. So let me ask you this. How does the real Arctic ambassador of Denmark feel when he watches the series? Share some of these reflections and reactions. Yeah.
I would say the first thing that comes to mind is I feel a lot of envy, because my sort of working life is not as dramatic as the Arctic ambassador in the series, and I understand, of course, why as Svend also said, why it should be like that. But in real life, I'm a civil servant. I'm working as a head of a department in Copenhagen, managing my staff, going to conferences, spending a lot of time in meetings. Because since 24th of February, I've spent hours with my colleagues from the 6 other like-minded states to make sure that the Arctic Council will still survive. It's, of course, for a diplomat, it's been dramatic, but it's, of course, not as dramatic as seen on TV.
So you're basically saying your life is more boring than the life of the
I mean, Mr. Chairman, I've been a diplomat for 35 years.
Yes.
I don't find diplomacy boring at all, but it's probably, I think, Per, you would be bored.
Maybe it's not the right term, but did you, when you watched it, and you watched the events evolve and the political tensions and the issues and the discussion, yes, sure, it's a drama series, you need to have people wanting to watch the next, and so on. But apart from that, you thought it was, on the whole, a realistic presentation of the situation.
Well, it is a drama series, so of course, as you say, it does, seen from my chair, overdo elements, as it should in a drama series. Yeah. But of course, I have days at work where I really feel there is a drama. Yeah. I mean, one of my main jobs is to coordinate the Arctic policy of the kingdom with my colleagues in Greenland and the Faroes. And of course, from time to time, we do not agree, and we have to spend time, again, not as dramatic as on TV, but we have to spend time discussing it.
But what we have not discussed yet is in the series, it is brought out very clearly that Greenland is now on the geopolitical chessboard. And you have the Americans, you have the Chinese, you have the Russians.
Sure.
And somehow the Danish foreign minister, prime minister, and the ministers in Greenland are sort of trying to deal with this new geopolitical situation. And I will ask all three of you, when you were bringing that element into the series, because you could have made it dramatic in many other ways, but you choose to take it into the very center of the geopolitical chessboard. You think that, I'll start with you, you think that's a realistic description of where Greenland is kind of heading? Is that the world that Greenland will find itself in, maybe already? Or is it just a dramatic sort of play which has no connection to
I think it has a real touch upon reality, what's happening. The interests in the world for the Arctic region has been increasing over decades. And you see that. And just the offer to buy Greenland from Mr. Trump was just an awkward, in that sense, way of saying that it's interesting and it's relevant, but you actually see it all over. And the increase of temperatures, the climate change also increase the interest for the riches that we have in the region. I'm not saying Greenland in particular, but in the Arctic as a region, because it gets much more accessible, trading routes and so forth. All of this is happening at the moment and has been moving forward in decades.
So before I come to the Ambassador, Per, the reason why you brought this so substantially into the series, was that just in order to create some drama, or you think it reflected a kind of emerging reality?
Yeah, it's actually a question I cannot answer, because it's Adam who'd have been taking this decisions to make the series about that. When I got hired, that decision was already taken. But when so it's his choice. But with that being said, I felt many times during the shoot and the election in Greenland, that was at the same time we were shooting, that we were very, very close to the political affairs, as Svend says now. So I think it's an interesting choice, and it's a good choice to try to be so contemporary in the political scene of Borgen.
A small example of it, when they were in this 2 weeks crash course in Greenland, and that was before the election, we told Pierre that they should actually meet with Mutsi Beede before he was elected as the premier, and Pile Broberg, our former Minister for Foreign Affairs. And it just resembles what is happening in our part of the world. They had true access to those two persons. And after the election, all the things that transpired afterwards, it actually also had a real effect on how close to top politics that you are in our part of the world. So that was a great experience for them, at least.
Absolutely.
Well, I can only agree. I mean, I think it's a quite natural choice for Adam to choose this sort of the new geopolitics. I think, as Svend said, this is not something that started on 24th of February or with the offer of then President Trump to buy Greenland. It goes further back to the opening up of the region because of climate change. So why not choose this? I think that was a natural and wise choice.
But it's an interesting reflection of how the world works, that Trump does one tweet, and all the global television stations cover Greenland for a number of days.
Yeah.
And of course, a lot of people laughed at him, but basically it made sense if you were a real estate developer and it was for sale. And then Netflix makes this series. And everybody is watching these internal politics of Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark and the USA and China and Russia. So maybe Twitter and Netflix have put Greenland on the map that none of us in the Arctic Circle or even in the Danish government could do. And now we have millions of people all over the world having been educated on this political process. So I think for the leaders of Greenland to move forward is the combination of Twitter and Netflix have now brought them onto the global stage, that every Scandinavian politician would envy them of that kind of thing. So my final question to you, how would you recommend to the leadership of Greenland to use this sudden media fame on the global stage? I'm not talking about your fame as an actor, I'm talking about their fame as elected leaders of Greenland. Because this is new. This is completely new.
It is new because the issues in the Arctic, in our region, has been brought into so many homes.
Yeah.
So the average person in a country already have a brief introduction on what's happening. And that is something to build upon, because you know something about where we are in the world, what's at stake, and that can be utilized if they want.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's why the Arctic Circle brought Netflix onto this plenary stage. But thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for this idea. Thank you, Tommy, for being willing to turn up as the real Arctic ambassador of Denmark. Thank you, Per, for having contributed in this enormous way to the global dialogue on the future of the Arctic. Thank
it was
you
a
very
pleasure
much.
all the way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll have the next session. Yeah.